Howdy, my name is Joshua Tyler. I'm a student at Texas A&M University, and I am in HTED Services.
Hi, I'm Callie Choi. I am a student at Fluor Presentation, and I'm doing tax partnership.
And I'm Jenny Fedora, and I went to Texas Tech, and I am in HTED Services too.
And today I'd like to introduce you guys to Fluor Corporation. Before we get started, we just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. In front of you, you guys should have received a packet of information. Included in that deck is an outline of our presentation and what we plan to talk about, just in case you would like to take notes. Next, we included the account detail report. We're not going to go into too much detail about that because a lot of the information is implemented throughout our presentation. So just after the presentation, if you want to reference our key points, you can take a look at that. And then we included an opportunity pipeline, just so that you can have some sort of idea of the opportunities that we've won and lost in this current fiscal year. Okay, and as an overview of what we're going to be doing today, I'm going to give an overview of, or an introduction of Fluor Corporation, who they are, what they do. Callie will take us on a culture journey, and she'll explain the current relationship that Grant Thornton has with Fluor. Jenny will explain the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that Fluor faces. We'll talk about third-party compliance, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So at its most basic level, Fluor is an engineering and construction company. They provide project management and engineering services to many client markets like power, mining, energy, procurement, a lot of different industries. They have offices in over 100 countries and bring in revenue of around $19 billion a year. And so in comparison to some of its competitors like KBR and CDMI Construction Company, we would say that Fluor is a powerhouse in the engineering and construction industry. And so we wanted to know what attributed to that success, and we narrowed it down to two factors. One being culture, which Callie will talk about in a few moments, and then two being the way in which they operate, specifically through joint ventures. And so at the end of the day, ultimately the theme of this presentation is that we think it'd be wise for Grant Thornton to offer some sort of third-party compliance service to help mitigate the risk of joint ventures. And so next we'll have Callie talk about the current relationship with Fluor.
Okay, so Fluor came to us about 5 years ago. They wanted us to prepare and file some of their tax reports. Although they have an internal tax system at Fluor, they wanted someone who wasn't involved in Fluor or any of their joint ventures to come in and just do the reports. That way it mitigates a lot of that risk involved. And so currently we are still only generating revenue from that one service line being tax. As their projects grow and expand, so does our work with them. So we're currently doing about $150,000 worth of work per year. And when they first saw us, they saw us as a low-cost service provider, so they chose us to do their work. But now, over the past 5 years, our relationship with them has really blossomed. So no longer do they see us as just a low-cost service provider, but they see us as someone who has a lot of information, and they can trust us in doing the work they do. And so that's going to give us an edge when going forward, as they have more opportunities come up. And it's really going to be instrumental that we have that key relationship with them. And so going forward, it'll help us to win some of those opportunities. And next, I just want to touch on culture. As you know, culture is a really big thing here. And when companies are looking for someone to do their work, they want to do it with someone who has similar values and cultures as they do. And so here on the chart, you'll see in purple, it's our clearly won values that we're familiar with. And then down below in black, it's actually the competitive strengths from Fluor's 10K. So when we were reading through their 10K, we found it really interesting that each of their points in their 10K clearly aligned with our culture values. And so don't have enough time to go through each of them. But for agility, for example, for us, that means we're seeing with clarity and acting with purpose. Big component is we're embracing change and we're being responsive. This is a big thing at Fluor too, because they're known for their market differentiation. They have over 1,000 projects and 60 specialized industries. And so that they have to be practice agility, because as some markets go down, like the energy industry right now, other markets will go up. And so they can focus their time and energy on the industries that are strong. So now Jenny's going to talk about some of the purple chips.
And I really just want to touch on a few of the chips here, and we all know what Grant Thornton's purple chips are, of course, and as Callie was mentioning, culture is definitely one of the most important ones there, but they do align very similarly with Fluor's, and as you can see in the PowerPoint, we have quality and excellence and culture that are similar between the two. And then another one of Fluor's greatest priorities is safety, and that does make sense because they are a construction company, so you would kind of hope that they would be. But even when we visited their headquarters in Irving last week, we saw signs all over the place just saying, hey, be careful, don't slip, especially on staircases and everything. And so it was very evident that that was definitely one of their priorities. And then continuing to diversify, they are a very diverse company. They like to dip their toe in a whole bunch of different industries like JT was mentioning. And so we'll just go right into our SWOT analysis from here. And we really have already covered most of the strengths here, being that culture, safety, diversification. So I'm not going to touch on those again. But with weaknesses, we did say that 65% in one industry was a little bit much, especially because, as Callie was saying, oil's not doing so well. And with as diverse as they are, it's really not best to be that much in one area. But then we also talked with Jason Landhammer, who is the Director of Investor Relations at Fluor, and he was telling us that small project execution was actually one of their biggest weaknesses as well, because they tend to focus more on the bigger projects, and so some of the resources and time just doesn't get to those smaller ones. And so what they're doing to mitigate that is they take their younger project managers and put them on those projects so that they can gain a lot more experience and then go on to the big boy project later. And then dealing with politics, they were actually asked to give bids on the wall for Trump, and California kind of came back and said, hey, if you kind of continue this, we're not going to do business with you any longer. So kind of balancing between politics and just their daily business is going to be a bit of a challenge. But then for opportunities, they are starting to kind of invest in 3D printing. And so just getting new technology is going to help reduce the time they spend and money. And then the U.S. is trying to introduce bullet trains, and so there's going to be a whole lot of new railroads built, and because they are such a well-known and very well-trusted company, they're going to win a lot of those bids, and that'll be a great opportunity for them. And then Jason Landhammer also told us about how much they focus on education and just continuing education. They like to get their employees to kind of go back to school, not relearn, but learn new things and kind of keep up to date. And then we saw in their 10K for threats that the cyclical nature of construction was an issue because there are going to be times where there's closer to no work, which is going to have less income for them, and then times when there's going to be a lot of work and less resources for them. And then competitors, of course, that's going to be a threat for any company, but what they're doing is kind of different because they take their competitors and they make them into partners. So they're not competing, but they're working together instead. And then I don't want to touch too much on the high-risk joint ventures because JT and Callie will be touching on that in just a moment. But they do go into like Eastern Europe and China is some of their bigger ones. So I'll pass it off on to Callie to talk about more on that.
Okay, so when we visited Fluor, everyone we talked to kept going back to the risk involved with the joint ventures. And so that aligned perfectly with what we were seeing when we were doing our research, that there might be an opportunity for the risk advisory services to go in. And so we didn't have much information. We didn't really know where we could expand on that. So we actually reached out to David Bennett, who's the operations risk senior manager. And he explained to us, that not managing third-party risk tightly enough results in regulatory and scrutiny and anticipated losses. And so basically what that means is without having a third party like GT to come in and do regular checkups on the joint venture throughout the whole length of the joint venture, it can cause problems with, because we're such industrial across all over the world, it causes problems with that. And then we talked to David Bennett, and he laid out that the two main problems are involved with Fluor being exposed. That's because no matter if they have a joint venture with a smaller company around the world, it's going to come back on Fluor if there's a lack of quality produced, or if there's safety issues or accidents, it's going to reflect badly on Fluor. And then another big issue is with the bribery. So as we know, bribery is illegal in the United States, but it is legal elsewhere throughout the world. And so with having so many joint ventures spread throughout the world, it does cause problems in making sure that their joint ventures aren't accepting or offering bribes. Going through news articles, we've read that this has been a problem in the past. They actually went through lawsuits and lost a couple $1 million because of these bribery laws. And going against like the bribery laws in the United States will result in violation against the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And then if this goes and gets announced, it'll actually reflect poorly on Fluor's stock price. And so, again, our solution is to offer this third-party risk management thing, and it has 3 levels. When we talked to Jennifer, the Director of Forensic Advisory Services, and she went in and explained, I wish I could explain all the details she gave us, but it has 3 levels. And basically, you can choose which level you want to go into, but as you progress through the levels, it'll be a deeper and deeper background check on the company. And when meeting with Michael Terry, the business development manager, he told us that doing this service will provide an extra $100,000 to $200,000 worth of revenue for Grant Thornton.
So a lot of what Callie was talking about is the reputational risks associated with joint ventures, but we clearly know there are a lot more risks than that. And because there's so many risks, there's a need for Grant Thornton to at least try to do something about it. And so when we were presented with this framework, we thought it would be best to focus more so on the due diligence and monitoring piece of the pie. And so that's why our conversation with Jason Landcamer was so important, because we actually initiated a relationship with a person who we didn't originally have a relationship before we started this project. And so ultimately what Grant Thornton would like to do is go into Fluor and conduct an audit of some sort of investigation of these third parties. And depending on the scope of the investigation, looking for things like their revenue or their profit, take a look at their balance sheet, take a look at their stock price history, really just looking for any red flags that we can bring to light to help mitigate the risk of joint ventures. And so we were provided with another framework, and there's clearly a lot of services and a lot of solutions that we could offer. Once again, we're short on time, so I'll focus specifically on contract compliance. And really all that is just making sure that everybody who initially signs the agreement and agrees to be in a partnership or a joint venture is following the terms of that agreement, making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing in order to be successful. And so that's essentially what we would be trying to implement with the opportunity.
And as the next step, we do kind of recommend that we provide some training to Fluor. And so these are a few of the courses that are on my GTU, and we recommend that the internal team take these, and then they will go into Fluor, into on-site, and conduct kind of classes and the lunch and learns on-site for their benefit.
And just as a recap, we know we've thrown a lot of information at you guys, but just as a takeaway, joint ventures are very risky. We all know that. And so what we're trying to pitch is that Grant Thornton goes in and helps mitigate those risks through third-party compliance services, specifically due diligence, contract compliance, and monitoring. If nothing else comes from this presentation, at least we feel satisfied knowing that we initiated a new relationship with Fluor. So as we continue that relationship, continue to foster all of that, that should be at the forefront of everything that we do. And at the end of the day, we just want to be able to provide exceptional client service and add value to this.
So you talked a lot about construction compliance services. Which is extraordinarily important for not only the owner, but the contractor as well. So did you investigate out of curiosity services we actually can provide in that area? Have we done those before? What kind of experience can we bring to bear to let them know we have those capabilities?
We haven't brought any of that to Fluor recently. The only thing we've brought to them is tax compliance stuff.
Yeah, but according to the opportunity pipeline, we are qualified to do third-party background checks, which was initiated by Michael Ferry. And so that's in the works. We have our foot in the door with that. And so I don't think it'd be that big of an issue to implement more to help mitigate the risk of joint ventures. But yeah, that we are qualified to do the third party background check specifically.
So I commend you on having conversations with the client. Anything surprise you coming out of those conversations?
Honestly, I think I was a little bit surprised that they didn't do any kind of check because we would continually ask the question and he would kind of dodge the answer. Like he was trying to say, "Oh, well, we're still a great company, but yeah, we don't do that really." But he wouldn't say those words, and so I feel like that kind of surprised me that they didn't even. I wouldn't say that they didn't consider it, but they weren't doing anything in that regard at all.
Especially because he kept going back to talking about how great it was that they're expanding to so many different countries. But then when we bring up the point of like, with expanding to these countries, you come across these problems. You'd be like, yeah, we come across these, and then when we'd be like, what are you doing to like stop that? There wasn't very any answer. So that was like what we all took away for like most awesome things.
So you also mentioned that it's a weakness that 65% of the projects are in the energy space. And you talked a little bit, I think, about railroads, and clearly U.S. government has a desire to rebuild the infrastructure of this country as soon as they can allocate money. So that's what happened. At least the Democrats and the Republicans do agree on the fact that we need to rebuild it. So, and you talked about that as an area that they can go into. Is there anything we could help them do to prepare? Just out of curiosity, things that we do as a firm, is there anything that we can help them think about or prepare how to get ready for those roads or bridges and rail lines if that were to happen? I mean, sounds like they like to expand the country. Sounds like they like to do a lot of different things. Is there any advice you would give them? No magical answer, right? Yes, I don't want you to go, oh my God.
No, well, I do know that they are very concerned with the procurement part of it, and so we might suggest other companies that maybe we work with that we know kind of excel in those areas. We might direct them towards that because I know that is kind of an issue in this country right now is gathering resources and that kind of stuff. So I might go down that path.
Okay. In any of the conversations you had with them, they mentioned concerns about labor, having enough labor?
Yes, that was one of the weaknesses with small project execution. Like, how do you staff these small projects with huge overhead costs? I think it was something like that.
Yes, absolutely.
But that was definitely brought up, and so one way they were circumventing that is putting the I don't want to say lower level employees, but the inexperienced employees. They were assigning them to manage these small projects rather than people who have been in the game for years and years. Just as an education opportunity, just to sort of work their way up. So that was definitely something that Jason touched on.
Yeah, he was basically saying that the client, or not the client, but employees that they saw a lot of potential in being able to handle some of the bigger projects in the future. They just want them to have more experience. But how do you get someone who's just out of college to have like 15 years experience? Well, you can put them on these small projects to get them that kind of experience where if they make a mistake, well, yeah, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world because it's not a giant project.
So, that's one question. So I'm curious. So y'all talked to several people within the company. So were there any existing GT employees that were with you?
Yeah. So
And had they ever met any of those individuals?
yeah, that's it. Okay, so we are on the tax side. We have a relationship with our tax team. It's really close. We go up there, and you guys probably know if you do their tax work every year. And so we have a relationship with them. And so just on the tax side. But then when we went going into this, Lindsay Avnick and Tim Jang, the senior on the Fluor case for the tax side right now, they actually went with us, and they said it was really interesting that we got in there because this was something they never could experience before. And so this actually like spearheaded the relationship with the investor relations team. And so while we were there, they were there and like sitting in, and they were able to take their notes and stuff. And they asked a couple questions, but Lindsay, the manager, told us before, y'all are going to be leaving this conversation. Be ready with your questions. And so that's how it went. We asked their questions, and they asked a couple, but it was a really neat experience because that was something they were never able to do before that.
Yeah.
It's really the heart of what all these relationship plans are all about. Just getting out and talking to different people, even outside the tax or accounting area, because oftentimes they have insights on what the company is. So thank you guys very much.
Great
job,
guys. Thank you so much.